The morning of October 8, 1943, a basement laboratory at the University of Minnesota, B.F. Skinner, America's leading behavioral psychologist, stood before a panel of National Defense Research Committee officials, demonstrating something that defied military logic. A pigeon, trained through weeks of operant conditioning, pecked at a projected image of a ship with such consistent accuracy that it could theoretically guide a 1,000-pound bomb to its target with greater precision than any mechanical system yet devised. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The bird's success rate exceeded 90% under laboratory conditions. The officials watched in silence as the pigeon performed flawlessly, strike after strike, its beak hitting the target image with mechanical precision. Yet, within 18 months, despite investing over $25,000 in research and training thousands of birds, the military would cancel the project entirely, not because the pigeons failed, but because no one could accept that America's technological future might depend on creatures with brains the size of a fingertip. This is the documented story of Project Pigeon, later redesignated Project Orcon, the most scientifically rigorous and operationally absurd weapons guidance program in American military history. Based on declassified National Defense Research Committee documents, Skinner's published research papers, and military feasibility studies, this account reveals how the desperation of war pushed scientific innovation into territory where brilliance and absurdity became indistinguishable. The strategic crisis facing American military planners in 1943 was mathematical and absolute. Conventional bombing accuracy over Germany ranged between 2 and 12%, depending on weather conditions and altitude. The Norden bomb sight, America's most sophisticated targeting technology, cost $8,000 per unit and required extensive training. Even under ideal conditions, only one bomb in 10 struck within 1,000 feet of its intended target. At operational altitudes of 20,000 feet or higher, the ratio worsened dramatically. The Army Air Force's Statistical Control Division calculated that destroying a single German factory required an average of 4,500 bombs delivered across multiple missions. The tonnage requirements for strategic bombing were consuming American industrial capacity while producing questionable tactical results. The Office of Scientific Research and Development, established in June 1941 under Vannevar Bush, coordinated civilian scientific expertise for military applications. The National Defense Research Committee, operating under this umbrella, evaluated proposals ranging from radar systems to chemical weapons. Division 5, focused on new missiles and related weapons, received Skinner's Pigeon guidance proposal in late 1942. The proposal's premise seemed simple. Biological guidance systems could solve problems that mechanical systems could not. Pigeons possessed visual acuity superior to humans, reaction times measured in milliseconds, and could be trained through operant conditioning to perform specific behaviors with remarkable consistency. Most importantly, pigeons were abundant, cheap, and required minimal resources to maintain. Burhus Frederick Skinner had already revolutionized behavioral psychology through his work on operant conditioning at the University of Minnesota. His research demonstrated that behavior could be shaped through systematic reinforcement schedules. Animals, including pigeons, could learn complex tasks by associating specific actions with rewards. The pigeon's natural pecking response, redirected toward target images, could theoretically control bomb trajectory through mechanical linkages. The concept emerged from Skinner's observation that trained pigeons pecked at projected images with consistent force and accuracy when food reinforcement followed correct responses. The military application required solving several technical challenges. First, the guidance system needed to translate the pigeon's pecking into directional control inputs. Second, the birds needed training protocols that produced consistent performance under stress. Third, the entire apparatus needed to fit within a bomb's nose cone while protecting the bird during deployment. Fourth, the system required redundancy since individual animal performance might vary. Skinner's solution employed 3 pigeons in each guidance unit. Their collective responses averaged through mechanical summing mechanisms. This redundancy increased reliability while reducing individual bird performance requirements. The training methodology built upon Skinner's operant conditioning research. Pigeons underwent progressive training stages, beginning with simple target recognition. In Phase 1, birds learned to associate pecking an illuminated disc with food reward. Phase 2 introduced target images, initially high-contrast photographs of ships or ground installations. Phase 3 incorporated moving images simulating bomb trajectory. Phase 4 added stress factors, including vibration, noise, and reduced oxygen levels, approximating deployment conditions. The entire training program required 6 to 8 weeks per bird, with daily sessions lasting 2 to 3 hours. The apparatus itself represented elegant engineering constrained by space limitations. The guidance unit measured 18 inches long and 8 inches in diameter, fitting within a standard bomb nose cone. 3 pigeons occupied separate compartments, each facing a 4-inch diameter ground glass screen. A lens system projected the forward view onto these screens. When a pigeon pecked at a target image, contact switches registered the peck location. These signals fed into a mechanical summing device that calculated average displacement from screen center. This average displacement controlled bomb fins through servo mechanisms, steering the weapon toward the target. The system's genius lay in its simplicity. No electrical power was required for the pigeons themselves, only for the servo mechanisms. The bird's natural behavior, precisely shaped through training, provided computational power that vacuum tube electronics could not yet replicate. Each pigeon functioned as an analog computer, processing visual information and generating control outputs at speeds exceeding contemporary mechanical systems. Initial laboratory tests at the University of Minnesota produced remarkable results. Trained pigeons maintained target fixation for periods exceeding 10 minutes, far longer than required for bomb guidance. Peck accuracy remained within 2 millimeters of target center across hundreds of trials. Introduction of stress factors, vibration tables simulating bomb deployment, compressed air bursts mimicking wind shear, reduced but did not eliminate performance. Under conditions approximating actual deployment, trained pigeons maintained 70 to 80% accuracy, sufficient for practical guidance applications. The National Defense Research Committee's initial response combined fascination with skepticism. Division 5's technical evaluation acknowledged the system's potential advantages. Biological guidance required no rare materials. Production could scale rapidly using existing pigeon breeding operations. Training costs remained minimal compared to mechanical alternatives, and the system functioned independently of electromagnetic interference. However, military acceptance required demonstration under field conditions, proof of reliability across environmental extremes, and confidence that the bizarre concept would not undermine military morale if publicized. Project Pigeon received formal authorization in March 1943 with an initial budget of $25,000. General Electric's Project Engineering Department provided technical support for servo mechanisms and mechanical components. The work remained highly classified, not because of technical sensitivity, but because military leadership recognized the public relations catastrophe that would follow if America appeared to rely on birds for strategic bombing. The official project designation, organic homing device, deliberately obscured the biological nature of the guidance system. Skinner assembled a team of graduate students and research assistants at Minnesota. The pigeon training facility expanded to accommodate hundreds of birds in various training stages. Breeding operations began to ensure adequate supply, as each operational guidance unit required 3 trained birds, plus backup replacements. The logistics of maintaining a tactical pigeon force presented challenges unforeseen in initial planning. Feed requirements alone demanded established supply chains. Veterinary care became essential as respiratory infections could compromise training programs. Temperature control in training facilities required resources in a nation experiencing wartime shortages. The mechanical engineering challenges exceeded initial estimates. Translating pecks into fin movements required precision manufacturing. the summing mechanism that averaged 3 birds' responses needed to function reliably despite vibration and acceleration forces during bomb deployment. Servo mechanisms required miniaturization to fit within nose cone constraints. Protection for the birds during launch and flight demanded shock absorption systems that would not interfere with guidance functions. Each technical solution created additional complications that consumed research time and funding. By summer 1943, Project Pigeon had successfully trained over 200 birds and constructed multiple prototype guidance units. Laboratory demonstrations consistently achieved target acquisition and tracking. The trained pigeons exhibited behavior that seemed almost mechanical in its precision, pecking at target images with clockwork regularity, maintaining focus despite distractions, and performing reliably across multiple daily sessions. Skinner's conditioning protocols had transformed natural behavior into a technical capability that matched or exceeded contemporary mechanical guidance systems. The decisive demonstration occurred in October 1943, when National Defense Research Committee officials traveled to Minnesota for formal evaluation. Skinner prepared multiple demonstrations showing system capabilities under various conditions. The pigeons performed flawlessly, tracking ship silhouettes, following moving targets, maintaining accuracy despite noise and vibration, and demonstrating the redundancy advantages of 3-bird systems. The mechanical components functioned as designed. By every technical measure, Project Pigeon had succeeded. The guidance system worked, yet the officials' response revealed the project's fundamental problem. Technical success could not overcome psychological resistance. The concept of bomb guidance by birds struck military observers as simultaneously brilliant and absurd. Questions focused not on technical performance, but on reliability concerns that masked deeper discomfort. Could birds be trusted in combat conditions? What happened if one bird panicked? How could training consistency be maintained across thousands of birds? Would enemy countermeasures exploit biological vulnerabilities? Each question reflected underlying skepticism about trusting America's strategic bombing campaign to animals. The military's hesitation in autumn 1943 reflected broader technological developments that were rendering Project Pigeon obsolete before field deployment. Radar guidance systems, though primitive by later standards, offered the psychological comfort of electronic rather than biological control. Proximity. Fuses were demonstrating reliability in anti-aircraft applications. Most significantly, the Manhattan Project's progress suggested that precision guidance might become irrelevant if individual bombs possessed sufficient destructive power. The strategic calculation was shifting from accuracy to absolute destructive capability. Funding for Project Pigeon continued through late 1943, but without enthusiasm. Research proceeded on environmental testing, subjecting birds to temperature extremes from -40 to +120 degrees Fahrenheit, altitude chambers simulating 40,000 feet elevations, and acceleration testing on centrifuges. The pigeons proved remarkably resilient. Their performance degraded under extreme conditions but remained functional across ranges exceeding anticipated combat requirements. This biological robustness actually undermined the project, as it highlighted how living systems could match or exceed mechanical reliability, a conclusion that made military planners uncomfortable rather than confident. By January 1944, Project Pigeon faced an impossible dilemma. Every technical objective had been achieved. The guidance system functioned reliably. Trained pigeons performed consistently. Production could scale to meet operational requirements. Yet military commitment remained absent. The project existed in bureaucratic limbo, technically successful but operationally rejected, not through formal cancellation, but through passive disinterest. Funding continued at minimal levels, while decision-makers focused on conventional guidance systems that offered less capability but greater psychological acceptability. The final Project Pigeon demonstration occurred in February 1944 before a military evaluation board that included officers from Army Air Force's Materiel Command. Skinner presented comprehensive data showing system reliability, training efficiency, production scalability, and cost advantages. The demonstration birds performed perfectly, tracking targets, maintaining accuracy, functioning as designed. The evaluation board's report acknowledged technical success while recommending against operational deployment. The stated reasons cited concerns about combat reliability and logistical complexity. The unstated reason was simpler. The United States military would not entrust strategic bombing to pigeons, regardless of technical merit. Project Pigeon was officially suspended in October 1944 after consuming approximately $25,000 and 18 months of research effort. The project had succeeded technically while failing strategically. Skinner's behavioral psychology had proven that biological systems could perform computational tasks beyond contemporary mechanical capabilities. Yet this very success revealed military culture's dependence on technological solutions that aligned with institutional values and psychological comfort. Guidance by trained animals, however reliable, challenged fundamental assumptions about modern warfare's technological nature. The story of Project Pigeon should have ended in October 1944 with its suspension by the Army Air Forces. Instead, it entered a dormant phase that would last 4 years before resurrection under circumstances even more desperate than those that spawned it. The intervening years saw dramatic shifts in military aviation technology, the introduction of guided missiles, and the dawning nuclear age. Yet the fundamental problem that Skinner had attempted to solve, achieving precision guidance for aerial weapons, remained unsolved. Electronic systems had advanced, but reliability remained elusive. Mechanical guidance systems suffered from drift and required constant calibration. The promise of precision-guided munitions exceeded their actual performance by such margins that military planners in 1948 found themselves reconsidering options they had dismissed as absurd 4 years earlier. The Navy's interest in pigeon guidance emerged from a different strategic context than the Army's. Naval aviation focused on anti-shipping missions, where target identification and tracking presented unique challenges. Ships moved, creating targeting problems distinct from stationary ground installations. Electronic countermeasures could jam radar guidance. Weather conditions over open ocean degraded optical systems. The Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics, reviewing guidance options for the new generation of air-to-surface missiles under development, discovered Skinner's shelved research and recognized potential applications the Army had missed. In March 1948, the Office of Naval Research contacted Skinner about resuming pigeon guidance research under Navy sponsorship. Project Orcon, the designation standing for Organic Control, officially began in June 1948 with a budget of $25,000, precisely matching the Army's original investment. The project relocated to a Navy facility where Skinner could access improved technical resources and military engineering support unavailable during the earlier phase. The Navy's specific interest focused on guiding the Pelican missile, an air-to-surface weapon system designed for anti-shipping strikes. The Pelican's nose cone provided adequate space for the guidance system and the missile's trajectory, following a relatively straight path toward surface targets, suited pigeon capabilities better than the Army's dive-bombing applications. Skinner approached Project Orcon with 4 years of hindsight and technological advances unavailable during the original research. The training protocols underwent systematic refinement. The earlier program had relied on static photographic targets. The new methodology incorporated motion picture footage of actual ships filmed from various angles and distances, simulating the pigeon's view during missile flight. This training advancement produced birds capable of tracking moving targets and compensating for changes in aspect angle as the missile approached. The improvement in training realism translated directly to performance gains. Birds trained with motion picture targets maintained accuracy rates exceeding 90% under simulated flight conditions, a substantial improvement over the 70 to 80% achieved in the earlier program. The mechanical components benefited from wartime advances in miniaturization and precision manufacturing. The new guidance unit reduced weight by 30% while improving mechanical reliability. The servo mechanisms that translated pecks into control surface movements incorporated war surplus components from proximity fuse programs, leveraging proven technology to enhance system reliability. The three-pigeon redundancy remained, but the summing mechanism that averaged their responses now functioned with greater precision and faster response times. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Each technical refinement increased the system's credibility as a practical guidance solution rather than an experimental curiosity. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The training facility at the Navy installation housed over 500 pigeons in various training stages by autumn 1948. The birds lived in environmentally controlled aviaries, maintaining optimal conditions for health and performance. Each pigeon underwent a standardized training program lasting 8 weeks, twice the duration of the original Army program, but producing dramatically improved results. The extended training incorporated progressive difficulty levels that gradually introduced mission-realistic conditions. Early training stages used high-contrast targets against uniform backgrounds. Intermediate stages added background clutter, simulating ocean surfaces with waves and whitecaps. Advanced training incorporated realistic ship images at various distances and angles. The bird's performance during training exceeded even Skinner's expectations. Pigeons demonstrated remarkable ability to generalize from training images to novel targets. A bird trained on destroyer silhouettes could identify and track cruisers it had never seen. This generalization capability suggested that the pigeons were learning ship characteristics rather than memorizing specific images. The cognitive sophistication this implied challenged contemporary understanding of animal intelligence. Behavioral psychology in 1948 viewed animals as stimulus-response mechanisms incapable of abstract reasoning. Yet the pigeons' performance indicated they were extracting and applying general principles, a cognitive capability that formal theory claimed they did not possess. Environmental testing pushed the birds to extremes that would incapacitate human operators. Pigeons maintained target tracking at gravitational forces exceeding 6 Gs, far beyond human tolerance without specialized equipment. They functioned in near-vacuum conditions, simulating high-altitude flight. Temperature tolerance testing confirmed performance from -50 to +130 degrees Fahrenheit. Vibration testing at frequencies matching missile engine outputs produced no degradation in peck accuracy. The biological robustness that had concerned Army evaluators now represented a significant operational advantage. These birds could function in environments that would destroy electronic components and incapacitate human operators. The Navy conducted live flight testing in 1949 using modified Pelican missiles launched from carrier-based aircraft. The test missiles carried functioning guidance units with trained pigeons, but included safety officers who could override pigeon control if necessary. The first live test occurred on March 15, 1949, off the California coast with a destroyer serving as the target. The missile launched successfully, and the pigeon guidance system acquired the target within 3 seconds of reaching stable flight. The bird maintained target fixation throughout the missile's flight, steering it toward the destroyer with corrections that matched or exceeded electronic guidance capabilities. The safety officer never needed to intervene. The missile passed within 50 feet of the target ship, closer than any electronically guided missile had achieved during comparable tests. Subsequent flight tests through summer 1949 produced similar results. Across 12 launches, the pigeon-guided missiles achieved an average circular error probable of 75 feet, meaning half the missiles landed within 75 feet of their target point. Contemporary electronic guidance systems achieved circular error probable, exceeding 500 feet under similar conditions. The pigeons were not merely functional, they were superior to every alternative guidance system the Navy possessed. Technical success, once again, was absolute. The birds performed beyond specifications, demonstrating that biological guidance systems could exceed mechanical alternatives by orders of magnitude. Yet even as test results validated Skinner's vision, the strategic landscape was shifting in ways that rendered Project Orcon obsolete. The 1949 Soviet atomic bomb test transformed American defense priorities. Nuclear weapons changed the calculation for guided missiles. When a single warhead could destroy an entire port, precision guidance became less critical than delivery reliability. The military's focus shifted from hitting specific ships to ensuring nuclear weapons reached general target areas. A guidance system accurate to 75 feet became unnecessary when the weapon's destructive radius measured in miles. Simultaneously, electronic guidance technology was advancing rapidly. Radar homing systems, though less accurate than pigeons under test conditions, offered psychological advantages that biological systems could never match. Engineers could predict electronic system behavior through mathematical models. Troubleshooting mechanical failures followed logical diagnostic procedures. Most importantly, electronic systems aligned with military culture's technological self-image. The American military defined itself through technological superiority. Guidance by trained animals, however superior in performance, contradicted this institutional identity. The Navy's Evaluation Board convened in January 1950 to review Project Orcon's future. The board's report acknowledged the system's technical success while recommending against operational deployment. The reasoning revealed priorities that transcended purely technical considerations. The report noted that electronic guidance systems, though currently inferior, showed promise for rapid improvement. Investment in electronic technology would yield benefits across multiple weapons systems, while pigeon guidance represented a technological dead end. The report questioned whether crews would trust biological guidance in combat situations. It raised concerns about maintaining pigeon training programs across an operational fleet. Each objection reflected discomfort with the system's biological nature rather than genuine technical limitations. The most damning argument against Project Orcon emerged from public relations considerations. The report explicitly noted that enemy propaganda could exploit America's use of animal guidance systems to portray the United States as technologically backward. The psychological warfare implications of pigeon-guided missiles outweighed their technical advantages. American military prestige depended on projecting technological superiority. No amount of performance data could overcome the perception problem inherent in biological guidance. The United States, leader of the free world and atomic superpower, could not be seen relying on birds for weapons guidance, regardless of how well those birds performed. Project Orcon received final termination orders in June 1953 after 5 years of Navy sponsorship and additional expenditure exceeding $50,000. Combined with the Army's earlier investment, total program costs approached $75,000. The project had trained thousands of pigeons, conducted hundreds of tests, and achieved guidance accuracy exceeding all contemporary alternatives. It had solved the technical problem it was created to address, yet it ended not through technical failure, but through cultural rejection. The military's self-conception as a technological institution could not accommodate biological guidance, even when biology outperformed technology. Skinner published his account of Project Pigeon in American Psychologist in 1960, 7 years after the program's termination. The article, titled Pigeons in a Pelican, combined technical description with reflection on why the project failed despite succeeding. Skinner argued that the military's rejection revealed bias toward technological solutions regardless of merit. He noted the irony that human pilots, biological guidance systems far more complex and less reliable than trained pigeons, remained acceptable while simpler biological systems were rejected. The article sparked controversy within both military and scientific communities, raising uncomfortable questions about whether institutional prejudices limited technological options. The legacy of Project Pigeon and Project Orcon extends far beyond trained birds and cancelled weapons programs. Skinner's research fundamentally altered how scientists understood the relationship between biological and mechanical computation. The pigeons had demonstrated that living organisms could perform information processing tasks with speed and accuracy, exceeding contemporary electronic systems. This realization influenced the emerging field of cybernetics, where researchers like Norbert Wiener were exploring parallels between biological and mechanical control systems. The concept that computation could be biological, rather than exclusively mechanical, opened intellectual pathways that would eventually lead to neural networks and artificial intelligence research decades later. The military's rejection of biological guidance, despite its superior performance, revealed deeper truths about technological innovation and institutional culture. Organizations develop identities around particular technologies and resist alternatives that threaten those identities, regardless of performance advantages. The Army, Air Forces, and Navy defined themselves through sophisticated electronics, precision machinery, and advanced engineering. Introducing biological components into weapons systems challenged this self-conception at a fundamental level. The decision to cancel Project Orcon represented institutional values triumphing over technical merit, a pattern that would repeat throughout military technology development. Modern precision-guided munitions have achieved and exceeded the accuracy that Project Pigeon demonstrated in 1943. Laser guidance systems, GPS-guided bombs, and infrared homing missiles routinely place weapons within meters of intended targets. Yet these systems required decades of development and consumed billions of dollars in research funding. The electronic solutions that seemed preferable to pigeon guidance in 1950 took 30 years to match the performance that trained birds achieved with 8 weeks of conditioning and minimal resources. The technological path the military chose was slower and vastly more expensive than the biological alternative it rejected. The ethical questions surrounding Project Pigeon remain unresolved and increasingly relevant as military technology evolves. Using animals in weapons systems raises moral issues that were barely discussed during the project's existence. The pigeons in guided missiles would have been killed upon impact, sacrificed for military objectives they could not comprehend. Modern animal welfare standards would prohibit such use, yet the military continues deploying animals in combat roles. Dolphins detect mines, dogs locate explosives, and horses carry troops in difficult terrain. The distinction between acceptable and unacceptable animal military service remains poorly defined, shaped more by cultural comfort than consistent ethical principles. Skinner's work on operant conditioning, refined through Project Pigeon, revolutionized behavioral psychology and found applications far beyond military guidance. The training protocols developed for pigeons established principles now used in education, therapy, and animal training worldwide. The precision with which Skinner shaped pigeon behavior demonstrated that complex skills could be taught through systematic reinforcement, breaking tasks into progressive steps, and rewarding successive approximations of desired behavior. These techniques, first perfected to teach birds to guide bombs, now help children with autism learn communication skills and assist individuals recovering from strokes to regain motor functions. The technical knowledge gained from Project Pigeon influenced guidance system development in unexpected ways. Engineers studying the Pigeon guidance system recognized advantages of distributed processing and redundancy. The three-pigeon system, averaging multiple inputs to produce more reliable outputs, anticipated modern guidance systems that integrate data from multiple sensors to improve accuracy. The mechanical summing device that combined pigeon responses prefigured digital voting systems where multiple processors solve the combus, same problem independently, and compare results to detect errors. Concepts from biological guidance informed electronic system design even as biology itself was rejected. The program's documentation, preserved in National Archives records and Skinner's published papers, provides historians with detailed insight into how wartime desperation drives innovation into unexpected territory. The willingness to seriously consider pigeon guidance reflected military recognition that conventional approaches were failing. Strategic bombing accuracy remained abysmal throughout World War II, despite massive resource investment. When existing solutions fail, organizations become receptive to radical alternatives. Project Pigeon received funding not because military planners believed in biological guidance, but because they were desperate for anything that might work better than existing systems. The psychological dimension of Project Pigeon's failure deserves particular attention. The disconnect between measured performance and institutional acceptance reveals how deeply human psychology influences technological choices. Decision-makers confronted with data showing pigeon guidance outperforming electronic alternatives could not overcome visceral resistance to trusting birds with military missions. This psychological barrier operated independently of rational analysis, demonstrating that technological selection involves emotional and cultural factors as much as technical evaluation. Understanding why Project Pigeon failed requires examining human psychology as much as pigeon behavior. The classified nature of both Project Pigeon and Project Orcon meant that public awareness of these programs emerged only gradually through Skinner's publications and subsequent historical research. Most Americans remain unaware that their military seriously developed bird-guided missiles and achieved remarkable success. This obscurity reflects continuing discomfort with the concept. Military. Historians emphasize electronic guidance development and radar advances, while relegating biological guidance to footnotes or humorous anecdotes. The tendency to treat Project Pigeon as a curiosity, rather than a serious weapons program, perpetuates the bias that caused its cancellation. International response to revelations about Project Pigeon varied significantly across cultures. Soviet scientists expressed fascination with Skinner's operant conditioning techniques and attempted similar research with various animals for military applications. Their programs, even more classified than American efforts, reportedly explored using trained seals for submarine detection and dogs for mine clearance. European military establishments viewed biological guidance with skepticism matching American attitudes, reflecting shared cultural assumptions about proper relationships between technology and warfare. The global military community's rejection of biological guidance transcended Cold War divisions, suggesting deep-rooted cultural preferences for mechanical over biological solutions. The economic analysis of Project Pigeon reveals the true cost of institutional bias against biological solutions. The combined $75,000 invested in Pigeon and Orcon research produced guidance capability, exceeding systems that consumed tens of millions in development funding. Even accounting for the impossibility of deploying biological guidance at scale, the cost-effectiveness ratio favored pigeons by orders of magnitude. Yet economic efficiency proved irrelevant when confronting institutional resistance. The military's willingness to spend vastly more money for inferior electronic guidance rather than accept superior biological guidance demonstrates that organizational decisions prioritize cultural values over economic rationality. Modern autonomous weapons development faces similar tensions between capability and acceptability that plagued Project Pigeon. Artificial intelligence systems can now identify and engage targets faster and more accurately than human operators, yet military and civilian resistance to fully autonomous weapons reflects concerns about control and accountability. The debate over lethal autonomous weapons systems mirrors the Project Pigeon controversy, questioning whether certain capabilities should be deployed regardless of performance advantages. History suggests that today's unacceptable technologies may become tomorrow's standard systems as cultural attitudes evolve. The story of Project Pigeon ultimately transcends its immediate subject to illuminate fundamental questions about innovation, institutional culture, and the relationship between biology and technology. 20,000 trained pigeons proved that biological systems could guide bombs with 90% accuracy, using 1940s technology. The military cancelled the program not because it failed, but because success came from an unacceptable source. This outcome reveals more about human institutions than about pigeon capabilities. Organizations build identities around particular technologies and resist alternatives that threaten those identities, even when alternatives demonstrate superior performance. The pigeons that Skinner trained performed exactly as designed. They tracked targets with precision exceeding mechanical systems. They functioned reliably under extreme conditions. They offered guidance capability at minimal cost. Their failure was not technical but cultural. They could not overcome the perception that modern warfare required modern technology, and biology, however effective, did not qualify as modern. In choosing expensive electronic guidance over cheap biological alternatives, the military revealed that technological selection involves far more than technical evaluation. Cultural comfort, institutional identity, and psychological acceptability shape technological choices as powerfully as performance metrics. Today's precision-guided munitions vindicate Skinner's basic insight that guidance requires information, processing, target identification, and corrective control, functions that biological systems can perform as effectively as mechanical ones. The electronic systems that eventually succeeded took decades and billions of dollars to match what Pigeons achieved with weeks of training. Whether this outcome justified the path chosen remains debatable. What remains undeniable is that Project Pigeon demonstrated capabilities the military could not accept and solved problems it chose to solve differently. The trained pigeons, products of America's most desperate innovation, succeeded brilliantly at their assigned mission. They proved that nature's solutions could exceed human engineering. Then they disappeared into classified archives, victims of success that arrived in unacceptable form. Their story survives as testament to innovation's strange paths and institutional culture's power to override technical merit. In the basement laboratories where Skinner trained thousands of birds to guide bombs with remarkable precision, the future of warfare briefly rested on wings. That future was rejected, not because it couldn't fly, but because no one could accept where it might lead. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.